Hey folks, and welcome to another tutorial on how to build a desktop application style object-oriented Discord bot in Python. So what did we cover last time? We made some demo UI elements, and then we created this view, subclass view that we can use throughout our code with some additional features and functionality that's going to help us out a lot. So I think it's finally time that we delve into the first feature that we need to implement. And this is going to be character profile creation. If you remember at the beginning of the series, I demonstrated the character profiles for you. They're embedded messages formatted nicely with characters, information like personality, dislikes, rates, if they're some kind of employee or something. So I want to do that. And in order to get a grasp of what's going to be in our profile, I'd like to take a look at this extremely high quality PowerPoint that I've put together. So we're going to have a lot of information, not a lot, but a decent amount of information in this profile. Now you may be wondering why I've just slathered these all over the page in a random order. Well, typically the tutorials that I've experienced give you a challenge at some point. So that's going to be my challenge to you, is I'd like you to arrange all of these elements right here into 4 categories. So this is going to essentially outline our class structure for the profiles. So I'm going to stop right here for just a moment and pause the video and just group them together. You may not have the same groupings that I do, but it's a good exercise anyway. So I'll pause the video now. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide and we'll see what kinds of groupings we can get set up. So the first thing I did was generalize what each category was going to be. And I came up with details, at a glance, personality, and images. So let's take a look at what we've got in details. So I realized character name, that's a detail. The custom URL that's underlying the name, also a detail. The accent color, the list of characters' jobs, and rates information if they're, again, an employee or if they perform some kind of service. So next, in at a glance, I put just the simple basic one-line bits of information, and we can include those all in one section. So gender and pronouns, race, clan, orientation, height, age, and a friend code. So what a friend code is, the intent at least, is like in Final Fantasy, there's an add-on called Mare, and lets you see different glamored outfits for your friends. And that requires that you have a pairing ID with your friend. Similarly, you may have a phone application where you have a friend code, or another game where you can give a friend code to someone and link up with them. So I thought that would be an interesting field to add as well. So now under personality, we've got 4 things: likes, dislikes, personality, and about me. I know I put likes and dislikes on one line on the previous slide, but they're going to technically be 2 separate sections. And then finally, our images is pretty straightforward: thumbnail, main image, and additional. So this is how we're going to structure out our classes. You're definitely more than welcome to add bits of data, but remember, you're going to need to write your own methods for those to get them set and to get them integrated into the profile. So the other thing that I want to talk about is the internal information that we're going to be giving the profile. So this is going to help us identify the profile amongst all the rest of them in the bot. So there's 3 bits of information that I found to be very important. We're going to have a unique profile ID. We'll use this we will create this using the UUID module in Python. We need to have the Discord user, so the actual person to whom the profile belongs, and then we'll have a Discord guild. So if the individual is invoking the commands from within a guild, then we're going to attach that to the profile. Otherwise, we won't. Okay, So that concludes the planning process. If you've got any questions, take a look back through the last minute or two of lecture. Otherwise, let's hop over into the code and we can take a look at what's next. So let's go up here to our classes and we'll go ahead and yeet the demo UI. We don't need that file anymore. And there are usages in the cogs. So we can go ahead and run the delete. And then we can just go back into our testing cog right here and get rid of that import. And we can also get rid of this code here. We'll replace that a little bit later on once we start passing information into the bot, into the profile. But for now, in classes, I just want to create a new Python file and we're just going to call it profile. This is going to be the class that is a container for all the rest of the data. So if we look back at the handy PowerPoint, consider the profile to be this whole page, okay? So we're not going to store every individual piece of data in the profile. We don't want to do that. That's messy and it's going to lead to a really bulky module. So what I want to do is I want to store these bits of internal data as raw data. So this will be a string, this will be an actual user, and this will be an optional guild. So we're going to store these as data points, but these we're going to store under the class names that we've decided on here. So this is going to be profile details, profile at a glance, and so forth underneath the profile class. And then we're going to have a reference to the profile class from within each of these other classes, which is how they're going to be able to talk to one another. Okay, if I've scribbled enough on the screen, let me see, how do I delete that? There we go. Okay, so let's go back over into the code. We can start with our standard imports. From future, we're going to import annotations. From Discord, interaction. From typing, we're going to import type checking. And if we're in an IDE, we're going to pass for now, but we'll come back to it. Let's drop a horizontal rule in, and then we can define our container class for all of the subclasses. So we're just going to call it profile, call it what it is. And what I want to do is define slots. Essentially what the slots are is a list of the attributes that you're going to assign to this class. It helps optimize memory, makes it run a little bit faster, and I think it's just cleaner. It helps me understand a little bit better what's inside the class, what data we're using. So we're going to define that. So if we refer back to the PowerPoint, we've got this internal information here in the bottom right, and these are going to be the raw data points that we keep in this particular class. So let's make slots for those. They're going to be an ID, a user, and a guild, which again is going to be optional, but for the most part you're going to be getting a guild with your interactions. And then I also want to make a slot for each of the different subclasses as well. So all 4 of these that we created in boxes. So I want to say details, at a glance, personality, and images. And that's going to be everything that we need in our profile. So it's going to be a container for all this information. It's not going to have a whole lot of functionality until it comes to actually compiling the profile and posting it. But for now, I just want to get used to this structure. Okay, so we're going to come back and add some more code in here later. But what I want to talk about first is the different sections. So despite these sections having significantly different bits of data, they're going to operate in a very similar way. So what I want to do is I want to make an interface class that's going to define a handful of common functions between each of these, and then we can make them all subclasses of that in order to implement those functions seamlessly. Okay, so in classes, I'm going to make a new Python file called section. So let's run through all our imports, and then we'll see where those fit into the code itself. So we're going to say from future, import annotations, as usual. From Discord, we're going to import embed and interaction. From typing, I want to import type checking. Oop, not type var. Type checking. Any tuple. Type and now type var. And you'll see what we do with these last two in a second, since I know that they're brand new. But if we're type checking, this is finally where it's going to come in handy, because each of these profile sections is going to have a reference back out to the parent. So this is going to allow them to get information from other sections and utilize it within its code. So a primary example of this would be the accent color. Once the user sets an accent color, we want to be able to color all of our prompt messages that same color, just as kind of a novelty thing. So we're going to be able to reach out of the class and back into the details class to get that color. But if we directly import profile, so if we say from classes.profile import profile, this is going to cause a circular dependency, because the profile is relying on these profile sections, which is what we're making right here. So what I actually want to do is I want to put that under type checking. And this is going to import the profile class only when we're in an IDE, so we can use smart code and code completion within PyCharm. Okay, so let me grab another horizontal rule and we can start defining this. We'll go ahead and start by defining dunder all. This is going to be pretty straightforward for this one. We only have a profile section, which is what we're about to complete right now, and that's all we need to include for that. Okay, so under dunder all, I want to define t, which is going to be a type variable. And essentially what this is going to do is this is a generic stand-in for whatever the subclass of this type, this class ends up being. So I'll explain more in just a second, but for now let's create the class. We're going to call it profile section, standard class, and then let's define the slots. So the only common slot that all of our profile sections are going to share is a reference back to the parent profile. This is going to allow us to reach out of whatever class we're in and grab some data from one of the other storage classes within the profile, just in case we need to use it, maybe a reference to the character name or the accent color, but it is going to come up, so we want to have a reference to that parent. Let's define our init now. In addition to self, we're going to get in the parent, which is a profile, as the parameter. And then I just want to pass in args and keyword args here. This is a stand-in for any number of arguments and any number of keyword arguments that we can pass in. So instead of specifying every single bit of data that we want to get into this constructor, we're just going to say args and keyword args, and then we're going to search through those within the subclasses to find the data that we want. That might be a little confusing right now, but it will make sense once we start subclassing, so bear with me. Let's set self.parent equal to parent, and don't forget to type hint this. This is a profile, and now our IDE knows what data type we're working with. Okay, awesome. So I don't want to add anything else to the profile section right now until we start creating one of our classes, so you can see exactly why we add the functions that we do to our base class, to this profile section class. And you'll see the reasoning behind creating the functions once we jump into that. So in our classes folder, I'd like to start by making a directory and calling it profiles. We're going to have a lot of classes later on in the tutorial, so it's best to just section them off now. Let's go ahead and drop our two classes into profiles to start. So we have profile and section in there, and then under profiles I'd like to create a new Python file called dunderInit. This may seem familiar to what we did with the utilities folder, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say from .profile import all, and then from .section import all. This is the benefit of defining all in our module, is that we can just say import star. Easy enough. Okay. So let's go ahead and also say from .details import star. We haven't made this yet, but it's what we're about to make right now. So let's just close all of our tabs, and we'll start a new file, and we'll call it details. Before we start coding, I want to take a look at what this particular class is going to be able to do, because the behavior is going to be more or less replicated throughout the classes, just using different pieces of data. So if I go in here, I'm going to go ahead and type this from my other account just because the profile on that account is already made. So let's go ahead and pull that up. And we're going to say profile details. Okay, so what do we have here? This is our status embed, okay? So when we make our status function later, that's what is going to define what we see here. And as you can see, we've got our character name, our jobs right here. Don't mind the position. This was specifically for the bot that I created since it had to do with in-game venues. We needed to put their primary job here. That's not going to be in this project, so don't worry about that. We have their accent color and their profile URL as well. And we're going to have a section on here for their rates. So what happens if I click like the character name button? Well, that's going to pull up this input. And the excellent thing about this is that we've already pre-populated the input with what the person had before. Now let's say I change it. Let's say Allegro. What that's going to do is that's going to go back and that's going to change our status message to display the new name. And simultaneously we can still click on this and we can still submit a new name, and we can continue using this view until it times out, which I just happen to have set for 5 minutes. We can open our accent color. I've even included a color picker link for people who don't know their hex color, and various things. We can go to our jobs and we can select the main job. Again, the main job isn't going to be in this project. This was for the previous iteration of the bot, but I'm just demonstrating that we have a select menu that we can update information with, just like that. And then when we're done, we can clean up, and it's going to display our profile for us. Okay. Okay, so really quickly, let's go through our imports. And if type checking. This is going to be a little different. Normally we put a pass here and we say we'll come back to it. But in this case, remember in our section, we have a reference to the parent profile element. So we are going to need to import the profile class here, but we don't want to create a circular dependency because remember, in the profile, we're going to have a details and we're going to need to instantiate that details in the profile class. So if we were to import that, if we were to import the profile back into the details directly, that would create a circular dependency. Big no-no. So we're going to say from .profile, because remember we are in a package now that we've created this dunder init file, we're going to import profile, just like that. So next up, let's drop down and we can define dunder all. And that's going to be a tuple. And the only thing that we're going to put in here is profile details. That's the name of the class that we're about to create. So let's create that. We're just going to make class profile details, and we're going to make this a subclass of profile section, which we haven't imported yet. So since this is going to be used to subclass, we need to import this in our regular imports. So we're going to say from .section import profile section, just like that. Okay, so let's define our slots, because we always want to know exactly what data is going to be in the class at any given time. And remember, if you try to apply an attribute to the class that isn't in the slots, you're going to get an exception from Python. And honestly, I like that because that tells us if we've forgotten any logic or if we've left out an attribute somewhere or something like that. So it's best to be extremely explicit when defining what's going to be in our class. So what is going to be in our class? So if we refer back here to our PowerPoint, we're looking at details. So there's going to be 5 elements in our details class right here. And honestly, we're just going to name them what they are. So let's go back over into our code. Oh, not that one. That's the wrong window. There we go. And we're just going to define each of those. So what did we have? We had character name. And I want to start these with an underscore You'll see why in a minute, but we're going to expose these in properties, and the properties are going to allow us to perform things like update logic and process the data in a particular way before we store it. And then we don't have to repeat that logic elsewhere because it's just whenever you set the property, it's going to run the update logic. Okay, so the next thing we want to add is URL, color, jobs, rates. And then the last thing I want to add, we didn't discuss, but I'm going to add a post URL. So what this is going to do is our bot's behavior is not going to be if you finish your profile, it's going to just post a new message. That's unclean, that's messy, it's going to create a lot of clutter in your Discord channels. So what we're going to do is if somebody updates a profile that's already been posted and is still present on the server, we're just going to go back and we're going to update that message instead of posting a new one. It's a lot cleaner, and it's going to prevent us from having multiple profiles for the same individual on the same server. Okay, so this is all that we need for our slots. Let's define our init. So in the init, we're going to take the parent, which is a profile, and we're also going to take our args and keyword args. Now the keyword args is going to be more important in this context, and you're about to see why. Because we're going to root through those keyword arguments and try and find particular ones and then apply those to our data points. But before we do that, we need to call the superclass. So we need to call the init function for our profile section so we can pass the parent in. Because remember, we apply the logic of putting the parent as an attribute here in the profile section constructor. So we need to remember to call that. So to do that, we're going to say super, oh my goodness, dot init, there we go. And we're going to pass the parent and our args and keyword args for good measure. And let's make sure we have parentheses after the super. There we go. Alrighty. So now we're gonna root through the keyword args and try and find this data. So the way I want to do that is self.characterName, and remember we need to type this, so it's going to be an optional string because when we start out, they may not have entered their name, or as they're progressing, the name might be something that they enter later on. So we want to plan for that being empty potentially. I want to import optional. Perfect. And then we're going to set this equal to keywordargs.pop. Now, the pop method is attached to a dictionary. So, but we have a keyword args argument here. This isn't a dictionary. Well, actually it is, because this allows us to pass in any number of keyword arguments, and it's going to map those arguments with the string of the argument name as the key in the dictionary and the value that we pass as the dictionary value. So what we want to do is we want to search for character name in that dictionary, and if we find it, we're going to apply that value to character name. But if we don't find it, we're just going to return none. Okay, so that's what these two arguments do. This is what we're looking for, and this is the default value if it's not found. Okay, let's do the same thing with URL. This is also going to be an optional string. And let's do keywordargs.pop URL and none. Now, an issue that arose for me is I forgot whether I named this URL or custom URL. So I want to plan for both of those eventualities. So let's say that this returns none. We don't find the URL key in the keyword args. We're going to say or keywordargs.pop custom URL. Oh, if I can spell URL. And if we don't get that back, let's just return none. So we have two checks here trying to find either a URL or a custom URL. Next up is color. This is going to be an optional color class from Discord, and we want to import that. And then this is another situation where I want to add two keyword args arguments. So we're going to pop color with no U. But in the case that we don't find that, we're going to say keywordargs.pop color with a U, which is how it's spelled in the library. So this is going to cover our bases if we weren't paying attention and name it wrong. So self.jobs is going to be finally something different. This is going to be a list of strings. Excuse me, it's not optional, but it is a list. So let's make sure we import list. And then we're going to set this equal to keywordargs.pop jobs. But in the case that we don't find that, we're going to just set an empty list, which is why this isn't optional. Because regardless, we're going to have some sort of list inserted into this attribute. And then just for good measure, if for some reason we end up with none here, we definitely do not want none, because we're not going to be planning for none. We're going to be planning that we have at least an empty list. So let's make sure that we get that in there. Okay, so the rates is going to be an optional string. And we've done this before, just now, keywordargs.pop rates none. And finally, we have the post URL. Optional string, keywordargs.pop post URL, and none. Okay, excellent. So this is the init constructor for our profile details. Hey everyone, it's me, but from the future. I realized while I was editing the video that from about this point forward, I made just entirely too many mistakes, and we would just need to go back and change a lot of things if I were to proceed from here and then go back later on to edit what I've messed up. So I'm going to actually stop the video here for now, but I'll post the next video at the same time, so there shouldn't be any loss between moving from this one to that one, and we'll cover everything that we were going to cover in this video, just in 2 segments. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.